After a recent storm took out a couple of the beautiful roses outside our apartment, I knew I had to do something with the petals. When life kills your flowers, make champagne, am I right? We'll get to that in a second. Roses are absolutely delicious and edible raw. We will cover the health benefits and nutritional value of roses in another episode, so stay tuned. But today we're going to talk about using wildflowers to brew homemade champagne. Let's start with the flowers you should never use. This is foxglove. Foxglove is a really popular garden flower that also grows wild in wet soil. It grows near ditches and riverbeds. It's used medicinally in cardiac medicines, but you should never, ever eat it because it's really toxic and can cause nausea, vomiting, cardiac arrhythmia, seizures, and death. So best to leave that one alone. You can identify it by its bell-shaped flowers, which come in a lot of colors, but most distinctly purple, and sometimes the flowers have speckling on the insides of them. You'll know it when you see it. Here's a list of some flowers that are toxic to humans. To be safe, it's best to use a flower you can easily identify and Google for possible risks if you need to. You also shouldn't use clover to make champagne because when fermented, it can produce a crude form of coumadin, i.e. rat poison. Remember, eat it totally fresh or totally dried. So what flowers are good to use? Dandelion and cat's ear are great flowers for this, and they're particularly rich in wild yeast. Dandelion also makes delicious wine too, as my friends know from last year's batch of Mandelion wine. This recipe is incredibly simple and you can use many different kinds of flowers for it. I used roses because I had a lot of them right in front of my house and our gardeners don't use pesticides. It's fun to try different combinations, like lavender and dandelion or whatever is growing at the time. The idea is that use wildflowers combined with a simple sugar water vinegar syrup, and the wild yeast in the flowers causes the whole mixture to ferment after a couple days. It produces some really nice champagne. So let's get cooking. For this recipe, you need about 4.5 cups of whatever flower you're going to use. I used roses for this. Make sure they're well washed, free of all dirt, debris, and bugs, and then drain them and set them aside. You're going to want to boil a lot of water for this because we need to sanitize absolutely everything. This recipe is simple, but you have to make sure that you're covering your tracks here. So boil 2 liters of water, and once it's boiling, then you add 2 cups of white sugar to the mix. And then stir it all up until it's completely dissolved, and then remove it from the heat completely. Set it aside to cool. We're going to need 2 lemons, the juice of one and the slice of another, as well as a 1.5 tablespoons of plain white vinegar. Add the 2 liters of room temperature water, vinegar, lemon juice, and whatever else, and put it in the container. Also add the sugar water once it's cooled, and this is our basic brew. Give it a good stir. Cover it up. I usually use paper towels and then a clean washcloth, and then make sure you rubber band it closed so no fruit flies can get in. Check for signs of fermentation after 2 days. This includes bubbling and a yeasty smell. It will be ready to bottle after 5 or 6 days, and by then it should be pretty yeasty. It smells very yeasty. Sanitize absolutely everything that you're going to use for bottling. The bottles, the funnel, and the sieve. And then we basically just pour the liquid into the bottle, carefully and slowly. Seal it up, rinse off the bottle because we don't want to attract any fruit flies, and then just set it aside to dry. Here's a better picture of what it looks like. The mixture should be a bit bubbly at this point, so you can tell that it's actively fermenting. Leave a bit of room at the top because it does bubble over. So you can see that it's already bubbling. It's a lovely rose color. And then you gotta rinse it off because fruit fry, love this stuff. I save the rose petals and add them to my bath. It's luxurious. One final rinse. We gotta burp these bottles at least once a day because otherwise they'll explode. It's like real champagne. Okay, so this is just after fermenting for like 2 days. Faithfully burp it every day for about 2 weeks and you'll have a wonderful, crisp champagne on your hands. It's delightful. I think if we let it sit for maybe another month or so, it would be quite strong. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next week for our next plant. In the meantime, happy foraging.